I always do make time for folks who are starting out or have questions. I try to like always kind of pay it forward and make as many connections as I can. I just wish, I think every entrepreneur kind of experiences it. You just wish you have more hours in the day.
Yeah.
And just like that, we are back with the Mind the Growth podcast. As always, I am Chris Kinghorn.
I'm Eric Hoffman, and we're joined by a special friend and guest today, Mehdi Farsi, co-founder and what's your current role?
Just a co-founder.
Co-founder of State Bicycle Company.
Yeah.
Full name. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me, fellas. Thanks for coming by.
Yeah. So if you wouldn't mind giving us maybe a brief history of your entrepreneurial journey and how you came about to State.
Yeah, so State Bicycle Company was founded by myself and my brother Reza back in 2009. And really, it was kind of a passion project. We had both grown up around cycling our entire lives as kids. I think most people grow up riding bikes, and we can kind of touch on that later. But even more so, when we were kind of in grade school, our dad, who was also a huge cycling fan, took us to the Tour de France. We followed cycling the same way you would follow the NHL or the MLB or any professional sports, but it wasn't necessarily something that resonated with us, the same way, like I didn't really envision myself being a pro football player, pro basketball player, anything like that. Growing up in Arizona, most of the people I knew who seriously rode bikes were all my dad's age. And, you get a kid in high school or a college kid, thinking about that, nothing could be like less appealing, right? In Arizona, if you want to ride, especially in the summer, you're getting up at 4:30, 5 a.m. You're riding really close to each other in spandex. And again, it was mostly middle-aged guys. I didn't know anyone who was like seriously into bikes. So it was something that, was a part of my life, but just kind of as an observer.
I didn't know you went to the Tour de France.
Yeah.
Was that pre-Lance era?
No, it was right in the Lance.
Right in the Lance era.
In the Lance days.
1 ball or 2 balls?
One.
Okay.
1 ball Lance.
Yeah.
But when we were in college, around 2007 and graduating around 2007, 2008, a few things were happening. Reza and I were both kind of just in like circles of friends that had like a lot of creatives and, photographers, designers, people who were kind of into that sort of thing. Social media was like just starting to like really take its foothold, and fixed gear bikes in particular, especially in that crowd of people, started to become you started seeing them here and there. They weren't like super like prevalent by any means, but that's like when they first started to like gain a foothold of like popularity. And I think we were just like instantly like drawn to them, and it kind of like something like clicked about it. I mean, the culture around fixed gear bikes was not really at all what I hadn't had previously in my mind about who cyclists were. They were all folks that were, our age, riding, in cities, riding in street clothes, maybe running red lights here and there. And so the culture around it was a lot more counterculture. It was a lot more akin to skateboarding than, traditional road cycling. And that really resonated with us. So it was really kind of in the process of actually just trying to like find bikes for ourselves that we kind of identified that there was like a gap in the market for really affordable but custom looking bikes, fixed gear bikes in particular, because most riders at that time were procuring their bikes one of two ways. They were either getting like an old 80s, 90s road bike steel and converting it into a fixed gear, which there's some challenges there. Or you're like super into it and you're getting like a track bike frame from one place. Like maybe you're lucky if there was like one or two bike shops in your area that even carried it. And if you did have that shop, it was just a frame. So you're getting like most likely like a Bianchi track frame. And then you would have to go like source the cranks from one place, maybe go order the wheels from another place. And for people who are like new to it, it's like a pretty daunting experience. Your minimum in, $1,200-$1,300, which again, like someone fresh out of college, that's a ton of money. And you don't know if like it's all gonna fit together or what have you. So
get some crazy geometry at that point too. You've
totally.
got extra long cranks and
yeah. So we wanted to make really good riding, affordable bikes that were kind of like, and be like the one-stop shop, but, make these bikes that look custom and really cool and stuff that you'd be like pretty proud to ride. So I guess that's kind of the genesis of State Bicycle Company back in 2009.
And for those who don't know, a fixed gear bike essentially refers to the rotor, or
so the rear cog on a traditional bike, the rear hub usually has either a free wheel or a free hub, allowing the rear wheel to spin freely even if you're not pedaling.
Like when coasting.
Yeah, so you can coast. A fixed gear bike, originally were like the first bikes, the cog is literally like fixed to the wheel, so it's not moving. So if the wheel's moving, that means your cranks are moving. Think of it like as a direct drive, similar to a unicycle, right? Like you can't coast on a unicycle. Yeah, if the wheels are going, your pedals are going. And these were the bike of choice for messengers in big cities like San Francisco and New York, mainly because that's the tool of their trade, and they couldn't afford to have any mechanical malfunctions, and so it's basically the simplest type of bike that you can possibly construct, which I think also makes it one of the most beautiful types of bikes that you can construct, just because of the clean lines and the minimalist design approach to it. So I think that those are some of the reasons for the appeal. Also, kind of like tuner cars, like you can learn everything on a fixed gear bike like pretty quickly. Like I always joke with our customers that it takes longer to unpackage our bike than to like even assemble it for our fixed gear bike. So I think that was like mainly the appeal. And obviously if there's not a lot of moving parts on it, the price tends to be a lot more reasonable compared to alternatives on the market. So again, that's another pro in favor of like fixed gear bikes.
So I'm a huge bike fan. So I'm really excited to kind of bike nerd out on this. I've been more of a mountain bike guy in my life, but I totally have respect for the road bikers as well too. Something that's always been interesting to me, and I kind of want to just point this out too, is the idea of having a brake versus not having a brake. I mean, is that something that, when you say kind of counterculture, was it almost frowned upon to have a brake if you had a fixed gear bike?
Absolutely. Like if we're in a time machine thinking about, 2000, the late 2000s, so 2008, 2009, 2010, it was definitely kind of discouraged to ride with brakes. I'd like to think actually like State Bicycle and kind of our mission to just make cycling a lot more accessible to people, and we make cycling accessible in a lot of different ways. But telling people it's okay to just ride whatever you're comfortable with, etc. I think we've added a lot to that conversation, and like there are probably purists out there that think they're too cool for brakes, but
brakes are nice.
Yeah. I think
it's a nice luxury.
I think most people realize the importance of being able to stop your bicycle, and again, like I think we've been able to make fixed gear bikes look and feel really attractive, regardless of if they have brakes or not on them, or something silly like that. Like, I think that's a way, like brakeless riding is just like another way that like gatekeepers are keeping people away from the sport.
Right.
So we've known each other for quite a while. Back into high school days, I knew you through my older brother. And my experience with you pretty much from the get-go was you always tended to have some sort of entrepreneurial mechanism in play. And the first like real business that I remember from you, because I helped you unload a 18-wheeler carton or something. I think you paid me like $100, which was great at the time.
Yeah, that's good deal.
Was like furniture and other items that you imported from China. And at the time, I don't even think I knew the term e-commerce, but you seemed to be pretty early in that trend as well, just selling stuff online. So how did that experience parlay into wanting to pivot to a bike company rather than going all in on furniture or something else?
Yeah, so I think I previously mentioned, Reza and I were kind of in a lot of design circles and everything, and I think that was one of the things that kind of we were into like mid-century modern furniture and that kind of stuff. So a lot of our business aspirations, I guess, were just kind of following a lot like stuff that we were passionate for, etc. When we started the furniture business, you got to think, this was, again, we both graduated ASU in 2007, me in the summer, Reza in the winter. And around that time, like that was like when the housing bubble crashed, like employment opportunities were pretty grim at the time. Like the economy was like just in a bad place. So it was just like a good time, for us to kind of just roll the dice and bet on ourselves. And yeah, we were importing furniture for a while. That business did great. We actually, I think, grossed over $1 million like our first year. And, when you're 23, 24 years old, I mean, that's a good amount of money regardless, even now, but, and your overhead is really low. You're not married. You don't have kids. So
paying your friends $100.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Exactly. When you're doing all that kind of stuff, like that's like good money. And so I think that was one of the reasons we were able to kind of do the bike business kind of on the side and just keep rolling over the profits in the bike business and grow. But ultimately, we were importing mid-century modern furniture that were, replicas. They weren't like original creations. So we were basically competing solely on price. We didn't have much of a brand. We were pretty adept at online marketing and displaying the products in a really like attractive way, and we did well, but we were always competing solely on price, and that's a hard way to grow like a huge business. Whereas with State Bicycle Company, what we were doing is really creating our own brand, and ultimately just that business the bike business just kept getting more and more traction, and we had to, I think, around 2011, 2012, there was a real fork in the road moment where it's like, if we can't have one foot on each side. We got to like pick which path we want to go down. And I think we chose wisely with the bike business. It's a lot more fun, and the customers are a lot more fun to deal with.
So bring us back to around that period of time. How did you figure out how to import these types of things from China? Because that was, I assume, before like Alibaba was big and it was easy to just go online and pick something to import in bulk. So what did you do to figure that out?
Yeah, so recently, a lot of it was like trial and error, I'll like, honestly. So the very, very first stuff that we decided to import was actually like t-shirt printing equipment. So
that's right.
Very similar to like a lot of like college kids, high school kids, I think a lot of entrepreneurs just start out like, I want to make a clothing brand. And, every like a clothing brand to someone who's 20, 18, 19 years old, it's like, I'm going to print t-shirts with whatever sayings, blah, blah, blah. So
Actually,
yeah, see, exactly my point. And I know several people. I mean, I know guys who own restaurants now that did that. I know people, and I know people who did that and they kept doing it and they became big clothing brands. But yeah, so it started with that, and as that kind of grew, I was like, okay, well, like we want to do this like printing in-house. Like, how can like I make my better margins, because I'm paying the screen printer like way too much money. It takes weeks to like make a design, and like a lot of the stuff I was selling like was like topical, like based off of like news or sports or whatever, and it was like selling on eBay. So I needed to like turn things around really quick. So I started like looking for the equipment, and like I was like, oh, I don't know if it was like too expensive or just difficult to find. Anyway, I realized that I could make more money just selling the equipment to people who are like me than like just selling the clothing, or I could do both. So then I remember like saving up, I think it was like $5,000 to like buy a certain amount of these heat press machines. It was like all the money I had, like so much money. And like going to Bank of America and just giving them like this factory information and like wiring the money, and then just being like, oh shit, like did I just get scammed? There's like no way for me to like recoup this money. And yeah, the machines like showed up, and I sold them and bought more and yeah, just kept doing it. But early on, it was just like sites like Amazon and eBay, like primarily eBay. eBay was like a bigger market share probably at that time, like just selling shit on like Craigslist, eBay, that type of stuff.
Was that before the furniture, or was that post?
That was before.
Before, okay. And then you kind of phased into furniture after that.
Totally. Yeah, I was kind of like doing both simultaneously. Yeah, and then like furniture took off.
And then bikes. I mean.
Yeah, and now I'm done.
Well, we haven't gotten to that part of the interview yet. Remind me the timeline, because your dad originally owned Velo V, correct?
Yeah, so my dad had an e-commerce business and sold it, and then he wanted to follow his like passion, and him and like a local bike shop owner, like they decided to kind of develop their own brand of bikes too. And that was it was like almost in parallel with like State Bicycle Company. They were doing,
I wasn't sure if that came before or after, or
so it was like slightly before, but we were actually like we had our like furniture business and the heat press business like going pretty well. So we're actually like renting them space in our warehouse for a while. And then I think Reza
interesting dynamic.
Yeah. And then Reza and I told my dad, we were like thinking about like getting into like selling these types of bikes. And he didn't know about fixed gear bikes. And he was just like, kind of looked at us like, why do you want to get in the bike business? There's like no money in this. And I was just like, well, this is different. It's not really like a bike business. We're like not selling to people that are like consider themselves cyclists. It's a completely different market. So,
and you wound up acquiring that company eventually, right?
We did. We ended up acquiring it in like 2014, and then kind of just put it to the side.
Put it to sleep.
Yeah.
Was that, I think you told me at the time, was that because of the clientele, just a lot of customer service required for a high-end person versus State? It
was mostly like just due to like how much resources it took to like be able to compete in that space. Like again, State is like State Bicycle Company's we're kind of like in our own lane almost, which is really, really cool. But you think of like carbon fiber road bikes, there's so many companies doing it, Trek, Cervelo, and then direct to consumer, there's not many, but the players that are in it are really, really big. Like Canyon Bikes is like probably the most like prominent now. That company's raised like over $100 million. So, when we're like simultaneously trying to grow State, and we're getting like, $5 back for every $1 we put in at state, and then getting like $1.10 back for every dollar at best in Velo V. And again, it's not like state's like a mature business. There's still a lot of growth opportunity. The decision became pretty clear, like where we wanted to focus our resources. Because we are 100% bootstrapped. Like we haven't taken a single cent of outside investment ever. So, that there's pros and cons to that. But
slow and steady growth.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Sustainable growth too. Yeah.
Well, I guess kind of on that note then, looking to the future, what are some of your, maybe some high level goals and some more specific goals for, call it the next year, 2 years, 3 years?
Oh yeah. So, we've had some like pretty paramount back-to-back years in 2020 and 2021. Obviously there's kind of a multitude of factors that contributed to it. But the main driver from our experience has been like our pivot to like a lot of embracing like off-road cycling. And with that, we've been able to fetch like higher MSRPs for the bikes, expand kind of the parts and accessories lines that accompany those disciplines of cycling, and also reach a broader base of consumers. So fixed gear bikes were kind of our original bread and butter. We built a really, really great brand and done a lot of great storytelling over like almost a decade with that. And I think our brand cast a much bigger shadow than even our product offering. There were a lot of people that were outdoor enthusiasts or cycling enthusiasts that knew state. They loved our brand. They love what they do, but never in a million years would they like picture themselves on a fixed gear bike. So we kind of started bringing in to the fold, road bikes, some off-road offerings, just a more variety of product. And that's really like been able to like grow the umbrella of who our customer could be. And these are people, I think, in a lot of cases, again, that were kind of following our journey all along. Mm-hmm. And I think we did it at the right time. I mean, I don't know that you could start like day one and do all these different things. These are things that you grow into with your financial resources, with your expertise, with your manufacturing capabilities. And so you do it when the time is right. And then it's something that that really makes a difference when that time is right.
Well, then it seems like you are really good at identifying trends as well too. And obviously fixed gear, I remember, when I was in college too, I'm a few years younger than you guys, but fixed gear was everywhere. It had already grown to a point where everybody knew about it and people were excited about it. And obviously the cycling community is now becoming a lot more excited about gravel. What do you see? Do you feel like you're going to continue to go after that? Or I guess two-pronged question is, what do you potentially see as the next trend after that?
Yeah, so I think, I totally agree. Fixed gear, definitely at its height would probably like 2014, 2015, but there's always going to be a bunch of like customers just kind of baked into that type of bike, just because of the price point and the type of the demographic of like who rides those bikes. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's like going to go away, and we'll probably keep it. We just kind of keep building up. Definitely all road like exploration is hot right now, and I think that's going to be here to stay for a really long time. The e-bike segment is like probably, I think, what most people think is going to be like the future of cycling in the United States. I think that's like partially right, but that is a road that we're going to be going down later this year, and growing and expanding on that more into next year.
Yeah. That checks one of my questions right there. We'll have to touch on that a little bit later.
But I think regardless, whether we're selling unicycles or, carbon fiber bikes or whatever like bikes we're selling at State Bicycle, the common thread is that we're going to deliver something that's both really, really attractive, but also really, really accessible at whatever price point it may be, like in relation to the entire market. And I think what we do best at State Bicycle Company is really, like you said, identify a trend or even maybe create a trend or be ahead of a trend, and then distill that down into something that's really, really accessible for like the mass consumer base. Not dissimilar to like what maybe H&M or Zara do in fashion, where, you know, not everyone can afford like a Rick Owens boot or, you know, a cool Prada jacket, but those companies do a really great job at like taking like the essence down, still delivering like, you know, relatively
Looks
good
and
quality.
feels like it.
Yeah. Well, and I think like to take it like one step further, like with us, like it's a moving vehicle essentially. So like the quality has to be there as well. Like quality is like really paramount. It's not like, oh, my shirt shrunk, like I'll just buy another one for $10. Like, quality is still important. I think that's something that is pretty like self-evident. Like we wouldn't be here, you know, 12, 13 years later if the quality wasn't there. Like people will sniff that out pretty quickly.
Right.
So speaking of quality, have you gone through different manufacturers throughout the years, and how do you go about identifying the right one, creating the relationship, and how do you manage quality in that way, being here versus abroad?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's something that's like really, really paramount for us. You know, in regard to like product releases, we're probably not as quick as we could be, just because anything that is new that's coming out is tested, retested, tested again, sampled so many different times. So I mean, there are products that, you know, I wish we could have released like right now that probably won't come out until, you know, a year or 18 months from now, just because we're pretty meticulous when it comes to what we put out. But yeah, we work with a variety of manufacturers. To kind of answer your question, we have historically and we currently work with just a ton of different manufacturers. The way at least we do our bike manufacturing, you know, we order the frames from one spot. We order the wheels. I mean, even just the wheels themselves, the tires, the tubes, the hubs, the spokes, the rims, they all come from different factories.
And was that purposeful to diversify?
It is, because we want to hand select what we wanted to put on the bike. And when we were doing fixed gear bikes, it was a lot easier. When we are going with you know, more complicated bikes, it becomes a little bit more tricky, but essentially everything is shipped to then one assembly factory where we do assembly, package, and paint sometimes. If something's like really complicated in terms of paint, that's also like shipped out and then shipped back. So it's good because it provides flexibility. For example, you know, if your tire company can't get you tires, which is like stuff that we've seen throughout the whole pandemic, we're not just making like holding up for one factory. We can like switch. We can just interchange the parts. But yeah, I mean, it does create like a little bit more work on our end.
Sticking on the manufacturing line for a second, there's always the question of China versus the world and sourcing out of China. Generally, there's been a stigma that you get less quality and cheaper price. So I know you've been to China, you've toured a lot of the factories, maybe all of them that you work with, and I think you may work with others outside. So two-part question. Can you respond to the quality issue that most people perceive? And B, with the pandemic and some of the supply chain issues that are still going on, have you considered pivoting to a different area?
Yeah, so I guess to respond to your first part, I think there's grades and quality to manufacturing that could be done in like basically any country, right? Like you have a MacBook, I have an iPhone. I know at least my iPhone was made in China. Like, I personally don't have any problems with the quality. It's probably better than, 99% of like customer satisfaction, better than most products out there. I think most Americans and most people worldwide would be hard pressed to find something that isn't made in China, like that they, come in contact with on a daily basis. So it just depends. Mm-hmm. Like, of course, I mean, there's knockoffs and things like that you can buy on Amazon, and you kind of get what you pay for in a lot of regards. So there's Chinese made bikes that I would not want to ride for safety purposes, and there's Chinese products that are great in all sectors. In regards to manufacturing, domestically, it is actually impossible to make a 100% made in the USA bike. There's so many different, so usually when a bike is made in the USA, and I'm doing air quotes right now, it's the frame. Yeah. So you can make the frame. You can make a steel frame, a metal frame. It's usually steel or aluminum. The Walmart guys are actually like invested in a carbon fiber place in Bentonville, Arkansas, and they're doing carbon fiber made in the US. But it's small production, it's high price point, and then it's still outfitted with drivetrain systems that are manufactured overseas. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's any domestically made tire company, for example. So like, you need tires on your bike. So at the very least, a significant portion of the bike is going to be made overseas, like regardless. And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. Sure. During the Trump administration, there was like a lot of trade war stuff going on, and the imports from China did become a little bit more expensive. For a while, we re-examined our supply chain. We have worked with, and we currently do still work with, suppliers in Taiwan. We find that the Chinese counterparts just deliver a better product and are easier for us personally to work with, because of their connections to the many different parts companies and things like that. So, even if you're making your bikes in Taiwan, you're ending up importing from China to Taiwan a certain amount of product anyway. I guess it just depends on the factories you're working with, the suppliers, and then I guess the internal standards that your company has set, like what type of final product that your company is going to put out. Generally speaking, China makes most of the bikes. 99.5% of bikes sold in the US, I think, are imported. So very
isn't there a specific country where the vast majority of kind of carbon fiber frames come from as well too?
So higher end bikes, if we're not talking, it will be China and Taiwan, and then kind of if you're looking on like the lower end of the spectrum, so kind of you're talking about children's bikes, bikes that are sold, in your big box stores. You might get into Southeast Asia, so your Vietnam, that Cambodia, that type of place. But it's usually like one of those four countries.
Yeah, so anywhere between $100 bike to $10,000 bike, pretty much the majority of it's going to come from China or within the region,
or a portion of it. I would even venture to guess that like the raw carbon fiber material, even like if the frames are being made in like Taiwan or elsewhere, like maybe the raw material is still coming from China.
It's always going to go back to China.
We're all interconnected at this point.
Right.
Yeah.
So kind of touching on supply chain, because one of my, I guess, curiosities was the progression of the supply chain during COVID. When you look at the very beginning of it all the way up through now, were there high points, low points? I know you'd mentioned kind of looking at your strategy and kind of changing that. And then where does that kind of stand right now from a difficulty standpoint?
And that supply chain is not just our industry, but for a lot of industries is probably like the biggest pain point for companies, especially in the bike industry. just from our experience, we saw lead times go from 100 to 120 days for like a production of like a, a bike, like a reorder type of thing, balloon to upwards of a year or a year and a half. So now you're looking at 12 to 18 months, which again, like, it's fine now. Like, we've been able to like forecast and plan out, but when we first got hit with that sort of thing, it was a real challenge. Now the biggest challenge is really like, again, we have just so many outstanding POs that like so much of our capital is tied up in the supply chain. More so than like, when it did take 100 or 120 days.
In a new, really cool building, I must say.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. So,
and anecdotally, I was hearing from other friends in the e-commerce world, shipping containers went from like 12 grand to 40 in some cases.
Yeah. So I think historically we're paying, on the very low end, 4 to 6K. And yeah, I don't know that we paid more than 22, but like everything's landing at more than between 18 and 22K. Which again, it depends on how you want. Most of this is getting passed on to the consumer. I hate to say it, but right. I mean, that's just one of the reasons for inflation. But the items in particular that you're going to feel the squeeze the biggest are going to be inexpensive items that are very voluminous. Yeah. So if you think, I'm selling, again, AirPods or iPhones, and I could fit 200,000 in a container, so that extra 15K that I'm paying for the containers divided by 200,000 units, it's inconsequential.
Right, but they can justify 25% price
sure. Anyway, but I think where like actually state maybe even benefited from this in kind of a weird way is, previously you were seeing department stores, big box stores, retail bikes for $175. $200. Well, that means, those manufacturers have to sell to those companies at basically 50% of that. So now you're looking at, $80. And then, Walmart's not going to pay the price increase. The manufacturer has to pay that.
Yeah.
So again, if you're talking, 400 units in a container, and then it's, $20,000 more to receive it all of a sudden, or 15,000 more divided by that, their margins got really slim. So yeah. I think gone are the days of a sub $200 bike, which is good. Like for us, like kind of on our entry level stuff, like that's what a lot of people tend to kind of like at least price compare, in their mind. So yeah, I mean, we've had to raise our prices a few times, in the last 2 years, but, yeah, it's kind of just, it is what it is.
Yeah. So shifting back to the future, what I'm curious about is your plans for growing State in terms of really in general, when you have an e-commerce company, typically the goal is to either grow it to sell, grow it to acquire, or grow it to diversify. And so out of, those three hats, where's your mindset at? Are you looking at other brands you would consider scooping up? Are you looking at expanding maybe your services? You have a big warehouse now. Maybe you'll double it at some point and turn into a 3PL. What do you view as the future and the best bet?
I think State is still like really scratching the surface, and we're still like relatively small compared to a lot of major players in the cycling industry. I mean, without naming names, and there's companies that were doing $1 billion, $2 billion a year, and that was like pre-pandemic. And these were like almost all sales directly through local bike shops, not even online, where the majority of people are shifting the way they want to spend money. So I think there's a lot of runway for us in terms of just continuously like expanding our product line into all types of parts, accessories, and accompanying like products that complement cycling. So I think that's really where our focus is. Like I said, I mentioned we will be dipping our foot into the e-bike world and seeing if we have anything to add to that conversation. I think we do, though. If we're able to execute the way we envision. So I think that's really kind of the next steps for State Bicycle Company.
I don't know if you're able or willing to share, but do you have financial goals to grow it to in the next few years or down the road?
I'd prefer not to say that.
That's okay.
But,
it's worth the
no,
ask.
I don't know that we have like a financial goal. I mean, we've hit some big milestones. We have some personal milestones that I think are on the table. But I think what really kind of like motivates us and keeps us going is that, you know, there are certain players in the industry and we know what kind of numbers they're doing, and kind of just want to keep leapfrogging one after another, and our targets keep getting bigger and bigger. So yeah.
Gotcha. So I've always viewed from your position in State, your expertise being branding, marketing, etc. So in similar context to what I was asking before, have you ever thought about breaking off in the sense of creating an agency of sorts to help other brands grow based on your expertise, or your focus is just solely and will be on State?
At the moment, just because of the growth and kind of our goals, I am laser focused on State Bicycle Company, 110%. I think if whatever happened and I was no longer with State, that's probably where I would tend to gravitate towards, consulting, or, as you mentioned, creating some kind of a digital creative agency to help with product launches. Anything like from A to Z. Like, I've kind of been in that seat. Like, whether it's sourcing, I mean, we do it all here. So it just happens to be that it's through the medium of bikes. I mean, we do licensing deals. We do it all here. So yeah, I think that's probably what I would do in my next life, if that ever comes, career-wise. But as of right now, eyes are totally on the prize of State Bicycle Company and just putting more folks on our bikes.
We know a new startup that is would be interested in your services if you ever decide you want to do something part time.
Mind the Growth.
I think growth media, yeah.
Something like that.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Well, I always do make time for folks who are starting out or have questions. I try to always kind of pay it forward and make as many connections as I can. I just wish, I think every entrepreneur kind of experiences it. You just wish you have more hours in the day.
Yeah. So you have a 4-year-old. I have an 11-month-old. I've, in my life, had a shift in my perspective of business life, work-life balance, things of that nature. How has that affected your life in, running a company like State? And how has it changed your view of work, if at all?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that it's shifted my view of work. I mean, obviously, from a personal financial standpoint, having a family and everything, paying for college, all that kind of stuff, is in your mind. But I think I've always kind of really felt that responsibility, just because it's never just been myself, or it's never just been me and Reza. We have employees that we got to make payroll every month. We got a lot of people that rely on us. Yeah. So, having a kid doesn't necessarily change that. I would say it does make me appreciative for my role. Entrepreneurs work a lot, but also you do have a certain level of flexibility. So, I guess it's made me appreciative of kind of my schedule and having this balance. And who knows, she might be running this place one day too. I guess that's always a possibility. She always says she wants to come work at the bike office.
Yeah.
So she calls it the bike office. So
That's great. Great. Chris will have that experience.
Yeah,
Maybe?
it could be coming up there. We'll see. We'll see how things go. So, starting to kind of dwindle this down a little bit, but one question I always like to ask anyone who's into cycling, especially if you spend any time on the mountain, what is your favorite trail in Arizona?
Ooh, my favorite trail. I spend a lot of time in Browns Ranch, so not even like a particular trail, but like I guess a trail system. So
Right.
I live up like close to McDowell's.
Okay.
I think Browns is like awesome. I always like say like if you want to get anyone hooked on like cycling, just like take them up to Browns. It's like they
Right.
can be challenging enough to like make people like engaged, but also like it's not gonna like frighten anyone away.
Right.
So I don't
you
get
kind
into
of make it what you want of it. At that
exactly.
Point,
yeah, you can kind of choose your own adventure. So I could go with anyone like my dad's age to like someone who's like super super fit and anyone in between and have a good time out there. So
Cool.
I would say and it's free. Like
Yeah.
the parking is
Exactly.
easy. It's like part of it's like proximity. I mean, as far as like scenery, I think it's like pretty good too. So that's my favorite, at least.
Do you guys still do a ride to Tucson each year?
So we did 2020. We were going to do it in February. It got rained out, and so we postponed it to March, and then COVID hit,
Yeah.
and then it just like hasn't unrescheduled yet. We'll probably have it on the books, but I'm thinking it'll be like the end of 2022 because basically if we don't do it like this month or next month, like it's going to get too hot.
Exactly.
So
And then you have
it'll probably be
the
November.
what's the race called in the summertime? The dead of the
Oh
heat?
yeah, Hell Ride. So
Yeah.
yeah, for the listeners, Hell Ride is pick basically the hardest mountain we can think of climbing in Phoenix and the hottest day of the year, and we do it at noon. I don't know. I mean, like
Is it just climbing up Central at like 4 p.m.?
It was climbing up, to the
Like, up into
towers,
South
and
Mountain,
then the guards there they couldn't stop us from doing it, but they made it really really difficult for us to keep doing it. Like they were like citing us for litter that like we didn't make, like litter that was there, even though we definitely left that mountain cleaner than when we came.
Right.
Like citing for like any type of parking violation if we like pulled over to give someone water. So they made our lives hell, and we're just like, okay, fine, we'll like do it somewhere else. So we did it on Humboldt Mountain the last time we did it, which is a bit of a drive, but it's harder than South Mountain. I don't know. It's one of those things that like people ask me about. I pretty much have like the guts to do it every once in a while, and then like on like every alternate year, I'm just like, no, this is too hot. This is like really irresponsible. I should not do this. So, I think we're gonna do something similar, but I don't know. The world's getting hotter. I don't like.
Luckily, no casualties.
Yeah,
so far.
exactly. I feel it's like one of those things we've like escaped with like
Pushing your luck.
Yeah, exactly. So it's time to like take the money and run.
Yeah.
Let's
Just go to Flagstaff.
Yeah.
Just go a little elevation, but it's cooler.
Yeah. No, like you hear like these heat deaths of like hikers and stuff, and then it's like, okay, well, I'm not gonna have a race like a week later. That's like in bad taste, like in the middle of the heat.
Bad press is still good press, though, right?
Yeah. Well, that's another thing. Like, I mean, just again, you kind of take like the 10,000 foot picture of everything. Like when Reza and I started the company, again, we were like 23, 24. We like, didn't really like have much to our name. Like, young men taking chances. Like we didn't give a fuck. We'd do like whatever. And like you could just like play fast and loose when like you're starting out. But once you're established and you've climbed a little bit higher up the ladder, that's when people start taking shots. And again, like just more to lose. We're a bigger target, like, and as like a bigger entity, I think we have to have like more responsibility than we did when we were just starting out.
So looking back and finishing up with state for now, what's been the biggest growth catalyst for you? In my view, there's there's a few points that I noticed when you started sponsoring writers. It seemed like that was a big growth curve for you. Also, when you started collaborations with big brands, and now it seems like you're doing some more PR moves, like with the national parks and things like that. So, where do you see as the biggest catalysts, or are they all three just at different times?
Yeah, I mean, I think like holistically, like everything kind of like works together. So it's not like one or the other, like, and like certain things lead into other ones. Definitely, like you mentioned, like when we were first starting out, like getting some proven riders to ride our bikes and then go win events and like put some credibility behind the brand was like important. The collaborations and licensing deals that we do just keep getting higher and higher profile. And again, that's another way to just pull more people into the fold, whether it's, you know, the Grateful Dead or the Simpsons or Wu-Tang Clan. It's just like a way for us to connect to more customers. And then again, those are like really beloved brands in many cases. So seeing your logo next to something as iconic as one of those brands, I guess does carry weight for the consumer. But I would say like as of recently, we've just like been in like a really awesome zone with our inline regular product releases, like identifying really like good gaps, like making like, I mean, I think it's just a culmination of like experience, like dialing in the manufacturing, dialing in that like final product to the point where we released a product in November of 2020. It was our like first like our performance gravel bike, and April 2021 it was on the cover of Bicycling Magazine as the best bicycle of the year. And that's their biggest issue. That's like the spring issue where everyone's like finished with with winter, they're picking it up and they want to know like the 50 best products to buy. And we got the cover and it was a $1,300 bike, and we're going against $12,000 bikes and $10,000 bikes from people who have, and you know, the haters would be like, well, you just paid for that. It's like, I promise you, like we did not, if someone could pay for that, like it wouldn't be us. It would like Trek would have it, or Specialized. Like those companies are much, much bigger than us. By far. So I think like that type of credibility is just fueling us a little bit more. And then, I think it's one of those things like you see more state bikes on the road. Well, like those people are going to go tell their friends. And it just quickly becomes like kind of the go-to brand. Like we want to be the go-to brand when someone's like thinking about buying a bike online. Like I don't see why it can't be us.
Compounding's a hell of a drug.
Yeah, exactly.
Last question I have, then I'll pass off to Chris for any last ones he has.
Sure.
So you've also been somebody who I've noticed has really grown up surrounded with friends in the business world and made businesses with friends. I know one of your friends was also a co-founder who wound up leaving at some point in the last few years. So my question is, what's been your overall experience with working with and hiring friends in general? Has that been net positive, net neutral, maybe a little negative? And what would you recommend to other entrepreneurs who might consider the same?
I think it's mostly been a positive for us. I mean, in general, I think continuity is really important. I think trust is really important. And I think especially if you're running a small organization where you can't like really, everyone's busy and you can't micromanage, you need people who you can just like trust to just be out on an island like doing what they're supposed to be doing, and you don't necessarily need to check in with them.
Sure.
So these could be friends, these could be family, but it could also just be like a complete stranger that like, you know, turns into a friend. Like I think State Bicycle, like we're really proud. We don't have like a lot of turnover here. We try to retain people. I think during the pandemic we had 5 or 6 rehires, actually, people who like came back to us and they're like, yeah, we left and now we want to come back to State. So and that just might be our style. Like I think for every business and every person is probably different. But for me, I like to work with people that mostly like have a lot of integrity and you can kind of just trust them. I think that's like the most important factor for me. I don't know that I would necessarily like seek out like hiring only friends or anything like that. We're open-minded, but I'm lucky. Like I pretty much lived in Arizona since I was like 10, like went to college here, like lived here my entire adult life. So that's one of the, there's downsides and benefits to like staying in one place your basically your entire life. But like one of the main benefits is you grow a really, really strong network.
Yeah, the network effect is
Totally.
Yeah, that's like something. My dad is an entrepreneur, but he grew up in Iran, went to England for university, went back to Iran to work, had to leave for the revolution, lived in Kuwait, then moved to Texas, started his business, then moved to Arizona again. And, you know, he lost that like really big network. And he always said, like, if you guys stay put, like, that's one of the like best things you can have. Like if you need a dentist, you're gonna like know like a fucking dentist. If you need like a lawyer, you're gonna know a lawyer like that you can trust. If you need someone shady, like that's like crook, like you probably will know a couple of people like that too. So I think that's just one of the benefits of like staying in one place and also like, you know, networking with people and getting to know folks. And I think that can always be beneficial. If you're supportive of other people, they tend to be supportive of you as well.
Persians network like no other. Shout out to the Persian boys and girls out there. My wife's a Persian. Great people.
There you go. Yeah.
All right. Any last questions, Chris?
Yeah. So the way I'd like to lead this off, or I'd like to end the podcast with every episode, is just, what does the word growth mean to you? So the name of the podcast is Mind the Growth, and our goal is to, you know, help people grow in a variety of different ways, whether that's through, you know, financially, educationally, spiritually. You know, everyone's on their own journey of achieving what, you know, a sense of growth. So when you hear the word growth, you know, what does that mean to you?
Yeah. So I think for me, that means, you know, just progressing, even if it's, you know, very slowly or incrementally, towards you know, a place or a status of like mastery. I know like total mastery is like not, is kind of a theoretic, it's a hypothetical, but you know, getting closer and closer to whatever it is. So it doesn't mean like you necessarily are doing something different than you were doing 10 years ago. You might be doing the exact same thing, but getting closer to that like master level, getting closer to that like mastery. You know, you're getting closer to that Neo status where everything's slowed down and you can kind of see 10 steps ahead. I by no means don't think I'm there with State Bicycle, but definitely, you know, through all the chaos and the turbulence over the last 2 years with the business, you know, Rez and I looked around and we saw some of the things that our competitors were doing. We saw some of the panic moves that people were doing. We saw some of the weird things people were doing, and like we were calm. Like we really were able to kind of thrive in all the chaos. And I think that was something that wouldn't have been possible 10 years ago when we were kind of rookies to the business. But again, having that experience and being able to ride out tough times and putting all kinds of turbulence under your belt leads to like a certain calmness. And I think, again, you're closer to that mastery stage, you know, every day that you come into work and every day that you keep kind of stepping forward.
I'm going to pitch you on a next step, a Netflix documentary, Mehdi Dreams of Cycling.
There we go. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Where you require a new hire can only put on one of the what are those things called you put on the tires?
Oh yeah,
the air caps.
Yeah, the valve cover.
Yeah, you require them to do that for 8 years before they can move to the actual tire.
There you go. Yeah, Japanese style.
I love it. Good answer. Anything
No,
else?
that was a great answer. No, I think you've built an amazing brand, and I've been kind of watching from afar as a cyclist fan. So I really appreciate the time. It was great to meet you.
Well, thanks fellas. Thank
Thanks
you.
for having on. Appreciate
Thank you.
it.